a little bit. Just thank Eddie for doing this, putting this together. Very appropriate and moving gathering. And obviously the only problem with it is that Anita's not here, although she is, of course, also here. And I also want to just reiterate what Eddie said about various people who played caretaking roles with Anita, especially towards the end. All of us who care about her feel a debt of gratitude to each one of you. And there's a bunch of people. Carmen and Katie, Kati, thank you. And I also want to, of course, single out Edda as just a Beatle person and guardian angel. And personally, I just want to thank you for playing that role and roles. Okay. I did write this down, and I apologize for reading it off the script because just in case I lose it, which is definitely a possibility. So I will read off this little script for you. It seems somewhat inaccurate, almost disingenuous, to be honest, to say that the death of a 102-year-old person comes as a shock, but it does. Not in the sense of a deep surprise, but rather as a shock to the system. For me, I thought Anita Leyfell would live forever, and I know others did too. People have said this to me. The reason for this is not longevity, I think. It's not about the quantity of life or the quantity of years, but the quality and the vivid aliveness that was her life and her personality. And the presence that played in the lives of those of us who were close to her in various ways. It's a very tangible loss, and I know that it will take me years to process it, but here is a first draft. I often tell people about Anita. I tell them stories about her. I try to tell them her stories. It's never the whole story, of course, because that would be impossible for anyone. And with Anita, who lived many lives, it is particularly impossible. But I share the basic outlines with people, the highlights, if you will, or just sort of the big story. And sometimes they ask me this question. Actually, often I get this question when I mention some of the major storylines of Anita's life. They say, why did she return to Warsaw after the war? This is a big question. The answer for that is complicated, and there are actually many answers for it. There are many reasons why she and other people like her in her position returned to Warsaw. But the one that stands out in my mind, because I think it was the one that Anita herself emphasized in conversations with me, at least, was that the primary reason for starting a new life in the rubble of the post-war, post-ghetto Warsaw was simply this: hope. She had hope for the future in Poland. These were Anita's exact words. We believed. And by we, she meant she and Alexander, but also their circle of friends, young intellectuals. Of course, Anita said this somewhat slyly and self-critically, we believed, because, of course, things in Poland for her and for Alexander and for a lot of people became difficult enough that by the late 60s they had need to escape once again. So when she said we believed, she was being a little bit sly and a little bit ironic, a little bit self-critical too, hinting that perhaps they had miscalculated and that maybe even committed the greatest sin, as she put it to me, of any Pole, which is being a sucker. Being naive in a place where naivete is a hazard to your safety and well-being. But Anita also knew, and she communicated this to me directly as well, that she was proud that she believed. That she, in retrospect, did not consider herself at all a sucker for having returned and having believed, and for having believed in a better future. Not in that instance and not ever. On the contrary, she was proud to be a believer in creativity and in beauty and in culture and in literature and art and in the humanities and a just society, even if proved wrong. The need to believe in these things, to hope for a better future, a better world, was not just important and urgent and more beautiful, but far more brave than capitulating to despair. And Anita refused in her life despite many difficulties, to fall into despair. Now let us not be Pollyanna. Anita was no optimist. She never failed to question any optimistic statement about the world that I ever made to her. As much as she admired and even felt jealous of things American occasionally, she wrote in her book, and she would repeat this line occasionally, I want to be a tall blonde in Manhattan. She remained ever skeptical of American optimism. Her experiences in life simply didn't support it. But if Anita wasn't an optimist, she certainly was not a pessimist either. Far from it. But what then, if not an optimist and not a pessimist? What is that outlook? How would we describe that? I would call it making space for joy. Joy is momentary, but it is real. Joy is something shared between friends with tea and cake. Joy may not topple governments or dangerous regimes, at least not right away, but it will save your life, and it will restore a measure of sanity for you and your immediate loved ones. And joy is the thing that makes life beautiful. Nobody had a bigger or more sincere laugh than Anita. There's a picture of her, like a later picture of her, in a pose that's familiar to anyone who knew her, with her head back, her mouth wide open in a big, full-bodied laugh. This was very typical of her. Despite everything she endured and lost, she simply did not see life as a tragedy. She wrote in the, when she wrote in the comic vein, which, as we know, doesn't mean that she made light of things, but rather that she insisted that there was another way of telling the story, an equally valid and serious way of seeing life. Yes, there is sadness and loss, but there is also joy and camaraderie, and yes, even the possibility of sanity. Her sense of humor, both in person and as a writer and a radio performer, was, in her words, irony. Which is to say, I think that was also a French influence that she adored. Which is to say, it wasn't about ignoring life's hardships, but about taking a different perspective on them. And on insisting that any regular person, a regular storyteller's perspective, is just as valid and important and authoritative as the perspective of the people who wielded power and armies. The home that Anita made for herself and Alexander and their friends and family, a center for their community, was truly a home for all who entered, a place of safety and mutual understanding and warmth in a world that isn't always quite those things. Just yesterday, I was communicating with the obituary editor at the Boston Globe about doing a story on Anita, and he said to me, "Is this life fact-checked? Can we verify this?" He was amazed by some of the twists and turns and literally couldn't quite believe it. I gave him a few good reasons why he should believe in this life, and that it was indeed solidly documented and far from fake news. And then I added, and I thought about it for a second, and I also added this note, which I hadn't quite struck me until that moment. That Anita, despite her zest and wit and sly sense of humor, was actually a very modest, almost maddeningly modest at times, storyteller when it came to recounting her own life stories. I interview many people for a living, and I can honestly say that when you meet someone like Anita, who shares her stories only with a great deal of coaxing and patience, you believe what they tell you. The issue with a person like Anita as a storyteller can be that they omit details, that they downplay and understate, not that they exaggerate their stories. Anita, who loved stories and with a great style in telling them, had her reasons for keeping her own story under wraps. For one, Anita did not live in the past. She lived with a keen awareness of the past, her own and those of her communities, and yet she didn't live in the past. No, she had the remarkable ability to live in the present moment, awake and aware. I don't think it's an accident that she cultivated a Tai Chi practice. What is remarkable about her life isn't the longevity of it, not the turbulence of the first 50 years in particular, but what marks it is how she continued not just to be alive, but to live fully in the present moment until the end. Anita had style, and she was hip her whole life. She always wanted to know the gossip, the latest trends, and the most up-to-date news and fashions. I'm fairly certain that she was on Netflix before I was. She told me that she had a revelation about her own life that she had gleaned from watching a reality television show. I'm pretty sure she wasn't kidding. And she always had one moment, she was always one moment away, I believe, from becoming a Twitter personality. Many people get to a certain age and they stop and they turn inward, reviewing their own lives and especially their own early histories. And this is normal, this is common. Anita used to tease Alexander, for example, for his constant talk about his childhood in Austria and Poland. She didn't understand why he constantly wanted to revisit the past, when there was an internet to learn about, when there were TV shows to watch, and there was news to debate. Anita had a deeply youthful spirit her entire life, a sense of wonder, animated by the joys of music and company, and good conversation with friends, but also a sense of wonder at the endless turns of fate, of politics and history. As much as she deeply appreciated America, a place of refuge for her and Alexander, she also had the rare ability to be critical of the country that had been so kind to her. And I'm going to read a tiny, just one paragraph from her book that I worked on her with on this subject. This is from page 107. Even years later, she writes, when we've been living in America, the American way of life for decades, I still felt happy and grateful to have my own bathroom, to take a nice warm shower or bath. The memories would always come back of the period in my life when I would have given up half my years just to be able to feel hot water running over my head. Just like that. You turned it on and it would run. Once after one of these baths, I sat in my kitchen, in my bathrobe, and I wrote an ode to the shower. It also could have been called Ode to America. And yet, that's a quote from her book. And yet, this person who felt so grateful for America didn't stop paying attention, didn't ignore the complexities or hypocrisies of her adopted society. At age 100, a person might be excused for not feeling a terrible investment in electoral politics, in the vicissitudes of the American presidency, for example, or culture. But Anita watched with alarm and deep vigilance the recent decline in her country, in the country that she loved, and to which she felt such gratitude, into a place of open cruelty and folly, with echoes of the darkest shades of fascism, which she knew so well. Instead of disengaging, or doubling down on her patriotism, or some other defensive posture, Anita allowed herself at age 100 to open up and explore these questions, to revisit her own politics, and to care enough to stay involved in a future that she herself would not see. In her own immigration and naturalization papers, she had put down her nationality as stateless. I remember how upset she was to see the migration crisis playing out on TV, the victimization of people, especially children, fleeing war, seeking shelter in Europe and in the US, how much she personally identified with these asylum seekers. Anita didn't dwell on her past, but she never shed her past in triumph. It never ever failed to remain vigilant to its lessons. As an intellectual and a committed humanist, Anita not only derived a great deal of joy and comfort from art and literature, she deeply believed in these things as a matter of life and death. She didn't simply think that we should protect art and literature, but she believed that these things are what would protect us. Anita, by her own description, grew up what she called, this is her words, a spoiled child, which means that she was raised in a privileged bourgeois Warsaw home between the wars. The sense of privilege that she was given, of course, was swept away almost instantly when she was still a young adult in 1939 during the Nazi invasion of Poland and in the aftermath. In many ways, including some comical ways, mostly having to do with her bewilderment in the kitchen, for example, Anita remained that privileged young woman her entire life. But in a more significant way, she derived from that privilege a zealous commitment to culture, of refinement, of elegance, which is a word she used very often, that would sustain her own dignity through the worst of circumstances, and which, as she grew and weathered the storms of war and repression, into a true ethical imperative. There's a story she liked to tell, which is recorded in her book, about her time as a radio host in Poland, Warsaw, after the war. She played make-believe with her audience. She would air reports from Paris, or what she claimed it was Paris, interviewing a correspondent about the latest couture fashions on the streets of Paris. Of course, her correspondent was in the next room, and the sounds of a crackling telephone line were manufactured for the audience. This act of pretending to report from the West, from the free world, wasn't a joke, even if it was humorous. This act, I believe, this act of pretending to report from the West wasn't a joke. Oh, sorry, I just read that. It was a sincere, it was for her, I believe, a sincere form of hope, again. A way of reminding her audience in 1960s communist Poland that there was a big world out there, bigger than the world they lived in, and that newness was possible and available to them too. She wanted her listeners not to forget that they could imagine things, including a different world. Anita, when she was in the Soviet labor camp during the war, kept a book of poems that the rabbi read from so beautifully, and which is actually displayed, the actual book that she carried with her in the labor camp and all the years afterwards is right here on the table. She kept that book of poems by her beloved Julian Tugin, a book that gave her a lifeline to this hope during the bleakest days of her life and the bleakest days of life in general. Art and literature, beauty and music, and the imagination weren't, again, just things that needed to be sustained. They were things that would sustain you. Anita not only knew that, she lived it in so many ways. She was committed to it, and she modeled it for many people. I want to speak personally just for a quick moment. Anita was a mentor to me and a hero of mine. My friendship with her grew over the course of my adult life. I met her first when I was in college. She encouraged me and offered support of all kinds, including very specific advice and critique, as I made my first steps as a writer. She believed in me and invited me to believe in myself too. The opportunity I had to help her edit her memoirs was an education for me, and it stands as the greatest single privilege of my life as a writer, to learn from her directly like that. I mention this for one major reason. It wasn't just about me. I know that she encouraged and helped others too. This is what she did. Through her work as a storyteller, informally as a friend, but also professionally as a journalist, a radio host, a translator, a university lecturer, she created spaces of ethical engagement, places of safety and dialogue in a dangerous world, of sanity in societies that have lost their minds, and places of joy in a veil of tears. Above all, especially for her nearest and dearest, a warm home, where old and new friends gathered to sing and laugh and gossip, and also to share their hopes and fears openly over tea and pastries. Her life was a source of blessing to so many people over so many years, and I know that her memory will continue to be a source of blessing for all of us who knew her and who will continue to tell her stories.